My name is Christine Brown, and I'm the Chief of Staff to First Selectman Bill Gerber here in Fairfield. And before I begin any remarks, I wanted to start the night off by offering a moment of silence for the death of State Trooper Eric Pelletier, who was struck and killed by a motor vehicle today on Route 84 in Southington. Thank you. May his soul rest in peace. I want to welcome you all to this public information session, and thank you for taking time out of your schedules to come. We held a similar information session. Many of you were probably here on April 30th, and the purpose of that meeting was to update you on United Illuminating's proposal to move their transmission lines off the poles adjacent to Metro North train tracks and onto newly installed and incredibly tall poles that run along the north side of the tracks through Fairfield and then on into Bridgeport. Our panelists at that session discussed legislation that was moving through both houses at the time that would change the makeup of the Connecticut Siting Council and the process by which they decide on the placement of utility infrastructure throughout our state. So thanks to your support, that legislation passed. Yay! It passed through both houses with wide bipartisan support. And now, literally as of today, we found out today that it is sitting on Governor Lamont's desk awaiting either approval or veto. So tonight, we're going to give you information about that bill directly from the legislators who worked on it and call you to action. At the end of the evening, we're going to ask you all to email Governor Lamont and ask him to sign the bill if you haven't done so already. Following their remark, we're going to have time for question and answer, and then we will wrap up by 9 p.m. So now I'd like to introduce our panelists. First, we have Bill Gerber, our first selectman here in Fairfield, who's been an aggressive advocate for the town in this fight. Phil Piers, a partner with Cohen and Wolf and our town attorney. Phil's going to discuss the town's legal appeal in Connecticut Superior Court. Andrea Ozick is one of the 3 co-founders of SNEDI, Sasko Creek Neighbors Environmental Trust. This group of neighborhood volunteers has been critical in organizing and mobilizing support. Rep. Jennifer Leeper, who represents the 132nd District, and which covers the southern portion of Fairfield, including Southport. This utility line stretches across her entire district, and Rep. Leeper has been instrumental in negotiating the language of this bill and pushing for its passage. Rep. Steve Staffstrom of Bridgeport is chair of the Judiciary Committee. Without Representative Staffstrom's support, this bill would not have advanced to the floor of the House. Representative Sarah Kitt represents the 134th District, which includes the northern part of Fairfield and southern Trumbull. Most of her district is served by Eversource and is a cautionary tale of what happens when the town doesn't engage with the utility on planned projects like this one. And finally, Senator Tony Wong represents the 28th Senate District, which includes Fairfield, Easton, and Newtown. Representative Kristen McCarthy-Fahey is the other member of our Fairfield delegation who sends her apologies that she can't be here tonight to a family conflict. So we're going to start the evening off with a 10-minute video, followed by remarks from the panelists, and then we will have time for Q&A. So here we go.
United Illuminating filed for this rebuild project, and the vast majority of the people were in the dark. So the notice was very unclear. It was minimal at best.
People didn't have a chance to understand or to have any feedback in this process. It was unknown until we were alerted by neighbors in other towns that this development that was going to wreak havoc where they lived was going to do the same.
And in the 11th hour, the community came together and we rallied.
Nearly 1,000 people came to stand in solidarity against the United Illuminating transmission line proposal.
We learned a lot about the project, and we learned how impactful the project is.
No longer will this be a charming, sleepy New England town. It will be bifurcated by 145-foot monopoles, making us look like an industrial corridor that we are not.
We also learned that the project requires a new right-of-way, and that new right-of-way is the single biggest problem that this project creates.
That would cut through our historic district, our main street in Fairfield, and take nearly 20 acres of privately owned property and leveling 6.5 acres of trees.
The Siting Council clearly saw that that was a huge problem on the south side, and so what they decided to do was to move it to the north side.
What was really rather shocking is the Siting Council chose to approve something that the due diligence had not been completed on. And so they approved something without having researched it.
This was a Siting Council decision. UI didn't suggest this, and we didn't suggest this. The Siting Council suggested this. So now what they did is they took a problem on the south side, they just exported to the north side. But the same problem still exists there.
The issue is that this new solution that is being pursued by United Illuminating is still going to take easements from people and businesses. And that's really the part of the project that is the most egregious to us.
An easement is the highest impact thing that a utility company has the right to do. They get to take land from municipalities, from businesses, from private owners. So we're essentially using ratepayer money to take property from US citizens and put it on the balance sheets of foreign-owned companies. And that's offensive, no matter how you slice it or dice it. Other towns are beginning to realize that this line doesn't end here. It comes to their town. Bridgeport is awake to this, and they are mounting a serious opposition themselves.
This area is in desperate need of revitalization, and nonprofits and residents have been working together for a couple of decades to put together plans.
So this is Eliza Freeman's house, and it's going to be the resilience center for this community.
Just as everything's coming together, as millions of dollars of federal and state and local money are being poured into the footprint of the old little Liberia and the environs where the immigrants also settled and worked, all of a sudden, this land will be taken by the utility company UI in perpetuity. It's actually going to kill any chances that this part of town has to revitalize.
The impact of this will be permanent. Once these towers go up, they will not go away.
To put things into perspective, this is the height of an average 2.5-story house. Most buildings in Fairfield aren't much taller than this, but some of the proposed monopoles could be 9.5 stories tall. That's 95 feet high. And the project suggests that the poles could range between 95 and 195 feet tall. That's higher than a 19-story building, with over 100 poles towering over Southport, Fairfield, and Bridgeport.
So, with anything that is long-lasting, we should think about it long and hard, and we should really do what is best for posterity. And for posterity, that, in this case, means putting this line underground.
When you have buried lines in Greenwich and you have buried lines in Milford to Norwalk, because those were brand new right-of-ways that were being created, this is a brand new right-of-way. And in a highly dense corridor, UI should be burying this.
There are very few areas that tell the story of Black heritage and innovation and contributions to this nation. Even ironically, Lewis Latimer, who made the light bulb a commercial success because it was a failure when Edison actually created it. He couldn't get it to stay on for more than a couple of seconds. He lived in this community. And so the irony of it being just negatively impacted by the very person who turned on the lights is just a sad irony of history.
This opposition is strong and it's getting stronger. And instead of in 2 years from now, be at the point where we're going to begin opposing them again for this project, they could be starting construction on burying the lines and in 3 or 4 years have a completed project on their hands.
UI, if you're listening, let's work together to bury the lines. Don't keep us in the dark anymore.
There's some very talented volunteers who put that together. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our panel, starting with First Selectman Bill Gerber. And I just want to remind all the panelists, you have to push the button on the microphone and hold it down the whole time you're talking and speak directly into the microphone. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bill Gerber. Thank you all for coming out tonight. And I see a lot of familiar faces. I think there will be some recap of the story by Andrea later. I'm just going to talk about a few things that I've been personally involved. Well, first of all, you all know about HB 5507, and the people who helped write that bill are here. They're going to talk about that. Did have a chance to meet with United Illuminating a few weeks ago. One of the big topics of conversation, is there an echo? Does this sound okay? Okay. One of the big topics of conversation, I've received many emails with an article that was written in the New York Times as well. Recently, I saw something similar in, I think it was the New York Magazine, that there is an awakening now about new technology using carbon fibers that can double capacity on transmission lines without the huge infrastructure build. And the resistance to that by utility companies because they don't get to spend the money on their assets and get their guaranteed return. In fact, it seems like it is too cheap for them to make the money that they would like. So we did include that study of new types of transmission lines in our ask of UI to come to the meeting with us prepared. And we were sorely disappointed. We came with our expert our Cirrus expert who really knows this business inside and out. And the question was asked and it was answered with a half-baked answer that there would be no real material difference in the size of the poles, even if we upgraded the types of lines. And our expert said, but did you include dampening technology? And they said, oh, no, we didn't include that. And it became a little bit tense after that because it's very typical of the dealings with UI. They're never completely thorough, open, and honest with us. They're kind of half-baked answers, half-baked requests. So that was disappointing. The other part of the meeting was there was a lot of discussion about UI's going around asking people for rights of entry onto their property so that they can do their quote due diligence unquote. So what does due diligence mean? It's everything from surveying to taking, doing borings, taking core samples. In some cases, it would mean actually building small roadways onto your property, like you can see around, like on Congress Street, in order to get their drilling equipment onto your property, cutting down trees. It is not a small matter, and everyone should be aware that it could be very, very disruptive, and that there is Really sometimes no limit on the time period, but probably at least 3 years that they'd be able to do that at will anytime. What we said was, well, if you really want to get people to respond positively to you, you would carve out the requests from the request, a right of entry for surveying only, non-invasive surveying only, and you would make it 3 months, and you would do, go about it that way. That would be your first step. And we have yet to hear back from them. They said they would talk about it, put something together, and it's been complete crickets since then. So those are some disappointing things, continued disappointing things. One thing people should be aware of is that their due diligence period is 9 to 12 months. And I think we may have mentioned this last time, but that means that they expect to get to a 30% project engineered status by the first quarter of 2025. And only then will they, once they have 30% engineered status, only then will they disclose a plan to the public. Unfortunately for Bridgeport, they say that they're already 90% engineered. So they kind of, I guess they feel like they're pretty much done with the plans for that project in Bridgeport. If you've been hearing from Cornerstone, does everyone know who Cornerstone is? Cornerstone is a subcontractor who has been reaching out, doing some of the requests for rights of entry of people abutting on the north side. Cornerstone or somebody has been pretty aggressive in some of the statements we hear with some of the homeowners, and making statements like, if you don't let us on, you'll see us in court and things like that. I think somebody's going to speak about that tonight, I hope. That is just not true. If you hear anything like that from anyone who works or is associated with UI, please contact our office right away, and we will contact UI and make sure that first of all, you need to know who it is, who they work for, try to get their name. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Phil Pierce.
Thanks, Bill. So I will provide an update on the legal proceedings. So not much has happened in the last month. In the administrative appeal in Superior Court, we had a status conference with the judge, the Superior Court judge, and we entered a scheduling order. So this is the appeal of the Citing Council decision. It'll be reviewed by a single Superior Court judge. The first step in any administrative appeal is for the agency to file the record with the court. This record's about 8,000 pages, I think. You're going to see the record filed with the court by about June 21st. The town and the other plaintiff appellants will then be able to file their briefs by August 30th. This is our brief asking the court to sustain the appeal and reverse the decision. The Citing Council will have an opportunity, and UI will have the opportunity to file their opposition briefs by October 30th, reply briefs by the plaintiff appellants, town and the other parties by December 2nd. And then we have our hearing before the judge on January 13th. This is not a trial. This is a hearing on the record because it is a record appeal. So the hearing takes the form of oral argument. The judge would then have, unless he requests further briefing, would have 4 months to make the decision. Typically, this judge makes a decision in about 90 days based on other experience with him. Before the Citing Council, nothing else has happened. The next phase before the Citing Council, now that UI technically has a certificate approved, even though it's under appeal, would be that they would file their application for a development and management plan, which is a construction plan, essentially. What they've told us, and Bill just alluded to it, is that they've divided the construction phase into 2 phases. There's the Bridgeport phase, which they're doing first, and the Fairfield phase. The Bridgeport phase, as Bill said, is 90% designed, and the Fairfield phase is not very designed. They'll be at 30% in another year, they anticipate. They're saying that they anticipate filing the D&M plan with this council for the Bridgeport phase later this year, I believe. We'll see if that happens. If it does, the town's prepared to participate with Bridgeport to oppose that. And then Fairfield, they don't anticipate the Fairfield section being filed as a D&M plan until 2027, I believe. So that's still quite a ways off, and we'll hopefully see a design sooner than that. So that's the status of the legal proceedings.
All right. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? All right. Well, as Christine mentioned, my name is Andrea Ozick. I'm one of the co-founders of Sasko Creek Neighbors Environmental Trust. I know that's a tongue twister. I usually leave one word out every time I say it, but we usually call ourselves SNEDI for short. And we basically were formed back in August of 2023 when we realized what kind of damage we thought that this UI proposal would do to our community. There's a couple things I like to make sure that people understand about our organization and our purpose. First, we are not political or environmental advocates of any kind. We are just basically your neighbors. We live in Fairfield. We're grassroots volunteers who are just trying to do the best we can to protect our community, a community that we feel deeply connected with and we love. Second, we do support the need for robust, reliable power. This is really hard to keep your finger on. Say again. Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, it is. So secondly, we support the need for robust power infrastructure. I'm the first person to admit I'm pretty much of a wimp. I do not want to be sitting in my house on a 95-degree day without air conditioning. I would not have survived well on the prairie without my dishwasher and my washing machine and things like that. So I like my creature comforts. What I don't like is a power company coming in and abusing the awesome power that they are granted, especially when that power or when that abuse involves taking property from my neighbors. And that ultimately was the impetus for our opposition efforts. UI's original proposal would have taken land from the Pequot Library. It would have taken land from many businesses on the Post Road and in downtown Bridgeport. It would have taken land from churches, our parks, our open spaces. It would have taken land from historical properties. And it would have taken land from our neighbors and our friends. And so really that's what is unacceptable to us. So our mission is to protect our community from the unnecessary taking of property. Now, sometimes easements are necessary. We all agree with that, or we can agree with that anyway. However, we're dealing here with something called a permanent superior right easement. And what that means to the property owner who loses their property to one of these easements is that they cannot build anything on their property. You can't build a patio or a shed or even a swing set. You can't plant anything on your property. And that's not for 6 months or a year or 5 years or 10 years. It's forever. It's in perpetuity. And once UI obtains those easements, they can change how they use the property at any given point in time. So even if initially, let's say they run some power lines across the back of your property, and let's say it's not too bothersome to you, you might not think that that's a big deal, but they could come in at any point in time and decide that they need to have a service road through your backyard. Or they could make use of your property in some other invasive way. So because of the serious nature of these easements, we think that it's really crucial that there's a high bar to taking them. So in this case, there are feasible alternatives that exist. And that's why we have been and we will continue to advocate for undergrounding of these lines. The truth is that based on the way that the power companies are compensated these days, they have a significant financial incentive to build new infrastructure rather than upgrade what we've got. So in fact, for these projects, they're allowed to earn about 11 to 14% on the capital that they invest in these projects, a premium that is added into the cost of the project. And who do you think pays for that? You guessed it, us, the ratepayers. So we learned 3 other extremely disturbing facts as we dug into our case here. First, UI was unable to even demonstrate that this project is needed. The projections that they did themselves were that there's no additional need for power in Connecticut over the next 10 years. And that aging infrastructure that they told us about, that was the impetus for this project, the vast majority of that infrastructure was replaced in the 90s. So it's not the 100-year-old, crumbling infrastructure that they claimed. number two is that even though the proposal was positioned as a replacement of existing infrastructure, it actually involved increases in a significant increase in capacity, almost double what exists today. And that increase in capacity is not meant to benefit us. It's actually meant for UI to be able to ship it to New York, because that's a very profitable thing for them to do. So essentially, their plan includes infrastructure that we don't need. It inflicts significant harm on our community, and it takes our neighbors' property. And on top of it, they want us to pay for that. So their plan saddles Connecticut ratepayers with a larger, more costly and damaging system than we need in order to subsidize UI's bottom line. It all comes back to the money. And this number three is that the siting council, who oversees all of this, is biased toward the utilities. They turn a blind eye to these types of inconsistencies, despite the fact that the law says they have to consider the environmental, aesthetic, scenic, historic, and cultural concerns equally with the need to balance reliable, reasonably priced power. They simply trust what the utilities tell them without requiring any substantiation. And we saw this over and over in the siting council hearings. We asked for things like cost breakdowns for the astronomical estimate that they provided for the undergrounding of the line, which, by the way, would have made it the most expensive undergrounding project in the history of undergrounding projects. And the siting council said, don't worry about it. You don't need to provide that documentation. We asked for proof that the age of the infrastructure was what they said it was. And again, the siting council said, don't bother. You don't need to do that. So once upon a time, utilities were locally held organizations that were truly aimed at serving the public good. And they were given a monopoly status, and they could bypass certain regulations because there was an assumption that they were actually doing what was in the best interests of the community. But somewhere along the line, the process became corrupted because these utilities evolved into privately owned, profit-driven organizations, sometimes owned by foreign entities, which is the case in our situation. But despite this shift, they still get to operate as a monopoly, and they have this significant power to override rules that normal residents and businesses and municipalities cannot. So, what is the current status of this project right now? I think most of you know, but the siting council did make their decision to approve UI's application, but it had a pretty significant caveat to it. They said that it had to be moved to the north side of the tracks. That's significant because not one person on the council voted in favor of UI's original proposal. And it's also pretty remarkable because they approved a plan that was never actually designed. UI never even proposed a north side option. And in fact, during the hearing process, they indicated that it wasn't even a feasible route. So currently, UI is designing that north side route. And Sneddy, along with the town of Fairfield, the city of Bridgeport, and actually BJ's Wholesale Club are all appealing in Superior Court against that decision. Our main argument is that the siting council approved a plan that does not exist, and that violates two things. First, it violates their statutory obligation to balance the need for reliable, cost-effective power with the ecological and environmental impact to the state. And secondly, it violated the due process rights of everyone in Fairfield and Bridgeport because none of us had the opportunity to contest that plan. We couldn't offer evidence as to why that plan was not a good one. We could not even question it. And we don't have an opportunity for the rest, even from here on out. So Sneddy has our own attorney who works very closely and collaboratively with the town's legal counsel. They did so through the entire siting council process, and they will continue to do so through the appeal, though the town's attorney will take the lead, which will allow us to conserve our resources. What we expect is that the appeal process will take about 9 months to a year, as Bill said, and that regardless of the outcome, there will probably be a subsequent appeal by whoever does not get a favorable result. So this is going to be tied up in court for a while. So I don't want to take up any more time, but through this process, one thing that I have been constantly in awe of and appreciative of is just how many talented and hardworking people we have in our community pulling on this rope with us. There are far too many people to thank, but suffice it to say that it has taken a village to get where we are. It is a constant reminder of why this community is worth fighting for. One group of people that have been invaluable in this fight is our amazing state delegation. They've been arm in arm with us since the beginning, visiting neighborhoods, spreading awareness, answering questions from us at all hours of the night, attending rallies and events. And most recently, they've been working tirelessly to craft and advocate for a bill that corrects a lot of the process deficiencies that I've been talking about tonight. We had no idea how hard these people work on our behalf until we saw the legislative process up close. I am so grateful to them, and it is my honor to turn it over to my friend Jen Leeper so she can kick off their update to you regarding the status of those legislative efforts.
Can I? No.
Thanks, Andrea, for that. I feel like holding your button was like very symbolic for the process we've been on. I looked it up since August 15th. I had been saying August 16th all these months. So August 15th, Steve and Andrea, Ozek and I had our first meeting about this project. And I was like, bury the lines, you say. I've been wanting to do that throughout town for 10 years. And I would say it was it's a natural collaboration ever since. I've been saying since the beginning this was a real David and Goliath sort of fight. And we have definitely outperformed. And I just want to say, if you look around, this is why, because it's all of you and the incredible community outpouring and support that you've shown both SNEDI in the town and us as a delegation in sharing your ideas and all of these process breakdowns that Andrea has identified. That's their time and research that they've done into this 8,000 page docket and supporting materials and communication with us. And so because of their efforts, we've been able to be, I think, good advocates for how we can improve this process. And thanks for the partnership of certainly Representative Steve Sastrom from Bridgeport, and also three other committee chairs, Representative Matt Blumenthal from Stamford, who chairs the Government Administration and Elections Committee, Representative Jonathan Steinberg from Westport, who chairs the Energy and Technology Committee, and also Representative Joe Grusko, who chairs the Environment Committee, and he's from Stratford. This has been an incredible partnership and collaboration, and it's very atypical to have 4 big committees like this put forward legislation all focused on reforming the Siting Council, because it was so obvious what a broken process that Bridgeport and Fairfield have endured. But similarly, our communities further east have already sort of fallen victim to this proposal, and it really wasn't until UI hit Fairfield and Southport that they met their match. And again, that's because of us. But that's not how a good process should work. And so in partnership with SNEDI, the town, all of my colleagues, we really were able to put forward and successfully pass really meaningful legislation to reform the process. And I don't want to take all of Steve's thunder, but I'll just share some high-level reforms that were included in this legislation, and it really was quite robust. I just also want to recognize that Bridgeport's partnership with Fairfield and Southport in this fight is instrumental. And Bridgeport, as you know, is our largest city. And so when Bridgeport stands up and says, this is a huge problem, you get some additional ears to listen. And so again, I just want to recognize Representative Sastrom, because I'm not sure we could have achieved all that we did achieve without Bridgeport's involvement, and specifically his involvement. Being chair of the Judiciary Committee is a really powerful position in the legislature, and he shared a lot of his political capital with us, and we all will benefit from that. So thanks, Steve. But in terms of the legislation, we improved public notice both to the municipality and to the abutters. It can't be that you just get like a one-time postcard lost in your mail that's telling you you're losing your property to a utility forever, or that you're going to have, the back 40 feet of your property's trees cleared. So we improved the public notice, and we also made it so that municipalities will be automatic interveners in a docket when there is any property easement taking. The applicants will need to submit now more robust and transparent financial analysis for their proposals and also for the alternatives. And so this goes exactly to what Andrea was saying, which is the status quo. The utilities could decide this is the proposal we want. This is the most cost effective for ratepayers, but they never had to prove that. And there was never a process in which there could be any analysis on the financials of the alternatives that they themselves ruled out. That will no longer be allowed in the process. That's actually huge. It might sound boring, but it's really impactful. We made independent experts available to the siting council when evaluating applications, because it became very clear that they didn't have all of the expertise they needed for the enormity of dockets that they're charged with deciding on. So that's a huge thing, especially when you're asking for undergrounding. And then we have a utility that doesn't have a lot of experience undergrounding, and a siting council that really has no expertise in undergrounding. So I think that will be extremely valuable. And then also allowing municipalities to recoup their legal fees if they win their appeal, which is enormous, because as you all know, this is a huge cost to our community, and we will bear the cost for this fight. And so if we win appeal, we should be able to recoup those fees. And then also enforcing penalties on utilities for failing to meet all of these new requirements. And that also is huge and really has some teeth in it for the utilities to follow these new rules. So there's two tracks, as I'm sure you understand, what the town is doing through the courts, and then now these new regulations for what the utilities will have to do when they're presenting a case before the siting council. And our hope is that we win appeal, and then when the utility refiles, they will be subjected to these new regulations. I'm sure I've gone on long enough. I know this stuff is quite dry, but being in the weeds with our partners is how we're gonna, I think, deliver a better result for our community. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Representative Steve Stastrom.
Well, thank you, Jen. And certainly I think you're being way too kind. Certainly you've been the one really beating the drum on this from day one. And without your leadership in the legislature, I don't think this would have rose to the level of certainly having 4 different committees raise a bill on this session. I don't know that folks quite understand how rare that is. I've been fortunate enough to serve in the legislature for 10 years now. I represent the west side of Bridgeport, so Black Rock, the West End, Brooklawn neighborhoods. And I can't remember an issue where, particularly something like this, that had 4 different committees, 4 different committee chairs, all taking a look at an issue. And I think that really is a testament to your advocacy. Jen mentioned a couple of the highlights of the bill, and really what this is about is the bill is about several things. First, it's trying to eliminate some of, whether it be perception or, as I think most of us on this stage believe, reality, that the siting council has gotten far too cozy with the utilities. And how do we level the playing field? How do we ensure that the conflicts of interest are removed? How do we ensure that the siting council has the resources and the expertise it needs to independently evaluate projects? How do we make sure our municipalities have the resources they need, particularly through the legal fees, to be able to represent our interest before the Siting Council. You know, this fight before the Siting Council has not been cheap for Fairfield or for Bridgeport. And under existing statute, there was a $25,000 pocket of money that both towns could reach into to recoup some of their legal fees. But when you take a project of this magnitude, of, you know, this many acres, of this size, with this many filings and this many pages and the like, $25,000 split between the legal teams of two separate municipalities doesn't get you very far. You know, I practice law for a day job. I can tell you, we can chew through $12,000 pretty quick if we're asked to, right, Phil? You know, so we really did want to look at that. We also wanted to look at the consultation period and make sure that it wasn't just the chief elected official in each town who was getting briefed on a project, but that it went deeper than that, that it was some of the local and Bridgeport City Council folks or your RTM folks, and also us as legislators, so that if somebody looked at a project and said, well, you know, okay, I guess, but somebody else kind of looked at it a different way, that message got out into the community. You know, we really wanted to look at, and I think this is from a Bridgeport perspective, very, very important, is what is the economic impact of a project? I mean, what we see here with this project, and the video really does a good job of illustrating this, as you go down the corridors, you go down the line of where this project would impact in Bridgeport, coming in from just past the, as of tomorrow, to be renamed Fairfield Blackrock train station. Signs are going up tomorrow for the renaming. Thank you, Mr. First Selectman. When you go in past the Fairfield Blackrock train station and you head all the way towards downtown Bridgeport, a lot of that old State Street corridor is land that is underutilized right now. It has gone through a bunch of environmental remediation. You're starting to see some of those old factory buildings be converted into housing. You're starting to see places like Monger's Market start to pop up. You're starting to see some economic growth and development along that corridor. That is an area that is primed for high density growth, right? You're talking about, we know in Connecticut, we have one of the most acute housing shortages of any state in the entire country. We have a crisis of housing. Here's an area along the Metro North train line, along 95, that is primed for high density housing development, ground floor retail, ground floor development. And instead of putting housing there where we should be putting it, we're going to put power lines. That doesn't make any sense for the economy of Bridgeport. It doesn't make any sense for our collective economy of the Bridgeport region, and it doesn't make sense for the economy of the state of Connecticut. And so the fact that the Siting Council not just didn't look at that, but was barred from looking at that per statute is a real problem that we sought to try to address in this bill. I want to leave on two pieces. One, the last section of this bill, and is the one that some folks may know, the Siting Council actually, on its own volition, without being asked by, I don't know, anybody other than themselves, last week wrote a letter to the governor asking him to veto this legislation. Now, why the Siting Council, who we're trying to give more authority to, more independence to, more clout to, would turn around and write a letter to the governor asking him to veto a bill that is designed to help them is simply mind-boggling, and frankly, again, cuts at the lack of trust I think we all should have and do have in the Siting Council process. But one of the things the Siting Council was most sort of upset about is the last section of our bill is a study, but it asks DEEP to continue to look even deeper at some of the underlying issues of the Siting Council, the ones that we weren't able to get at this session because we were in a short legislative session, and there's only, and as much as we tackled, there's only so much. But that study should signify, I think, to all of you that we're not done. You know, we are committed to coming back at this, and it should signify to the utilities and to the Siting Council that we're not done. This is not a, okay, we passed a bill, look at us, we're gonna issue a press release and mission accomplished banners are going up. That's not the case here at all. This was a first step in looking at what is a broken process. And to me, the fact the Siting Council has wrote a letter to the governor asking to veto this bill further signifies just how much more work we have to do. Last point I'll make, and before I turn it over to Representative Kit, is on the veto, right? I will be shocked if the governor vetoes this bill. I do not think he will. I'm willing to take those odds to Vegas that he's not going to veto this bill. The governor's office has been a partner with us on this. There were 4 different bills that came out of various committees that had to be reconciled. There was concern and comments from different state agencies and stakeholders along the way. And we spent hours upon hours upon hours, actually in the governor's conference room. Representative Leeper, myself, and the chairs of the committee that she mentioned before, going line by line by line through this bill ad nausea. And so the governor's fingerprints are all over this bill. And I frankly want to thank him and his office for being partners with us in this fight. Representative Kit.
Steve, just one small thing. I'm a little upset you didn't warn me about the veto. I would have taken blood pressure medicine because I didn't know that. That is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. I just can't believe it.
Yeah, so there was a Siting Council meeting on Thursday of last week. I think it was Thursday of last week. So you can go back and you can watch the CTN transcript, but they just sort of out of the blue on their agenda issued a resolution pointing out 4 or 5 problems they see with the bill. I think they're all frankly ridiculous and trumped up sort of concerns they've raised, but the biggest one seemed to be that they are upset that the state would study their actions. I mean, here's a state agency. If the legislature doesn't study your actions and doesn't look at what you're doing, how are we performing our policy-making role and our oversight role? It would be a degradation of our duties not to be looking at their actions and their activities. That's what we are designed to do as a legislature.
Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, I am Sarah Kitt. I represent the 134th, which is the north end of town. I've got a tiny little bit of Southport as well as and a slice of Trumbull. I also bring with me tidings from Representative McCarthy Vahey, and together we just want to say thank you so much to the Ozicks and to Representative Leeper, who really listened to her constituents and took their concerns seriously and dug deep into the issue of UI, and I think learned more about utilities and the Siting Council than anybody can possibly imagine. She has been working tirelessly since she got that first call. And we also need to thank Bill Gerber and his administration for really putting the weight of Town Hall behind this and the resources of Town Hall behind this effort. We did score a big victory with the passage of this bill, but as Representative Stafford said, the battle's just starting. We have to fight what's going on over on the north side of the tracks now because we have no idea what's going in there. And we've been hearing a lot about a broken process, and what's going on up in Greenfield Hill, north end of town with Eversource is an example of that broken process and why we need to be vigilant about what UI is going to do down on the southern end of town. For those of you who don't know, or you've probably seen the huge poles that are going up in Greenfield Hill and along the Merritt. And the reason why there has been no public outcry, well, there has been outcry. I've talked to, this is an Eversource project. I've talked to neighbors and residents up there, and I've talked to Eversource. They already had the rights to those easements, so they did not need to go through the notification or any approval processes with the siting council, which is why we need to protect this part of town and Bridgeport to make sure that that doesn't happen here, because once we lose control of those easements, UI can come in and do whatever they want. So I really just want us all to stay vigilant and make sure that our utilities, which are supposed to be providing the residents with a public good, are not using our land and using their power and using the siting council to line their pockets. It is just, I think, amoral. And you all have done an amazing job as a community about coming together and really fighting to keep Fairfield and Bridgeport on top of this and ahead of the game, and to make sure that our communities do stay united in this fight. And I also want to say a thank you to Senator Wong. This really was a bipartisan effort. But we are here for the long haul. This is far from over. And I can tell you that we in the legislature are not going to stop. And as we've all said, this is just a first step.
First, I want to thank everybody for attending and those that are watching. Thank you for being present. I think it's an opportunity for me to kind of summarize all that what's been said. And I think for me, the summarization is this has been a total team effort. And I think the most rewarding part about this effort is it reinforces the fact that the people's voice matters, and it is equal to the power and the influence and the monopoly of a utility. People feel overwhelmed at times. And I think it really is a David versus a Goliath battle. And we were able to be on equal footing. And it is no small part due to this community getting together. It really was the 11th hour reaction to this. I literally use a football analogy. They were at the 5-yard line, ready to score the touchdown. I've used that often. And it is no small part due to the people of Sneddie. They were incredible, they were passionate, and they really, really advocated and raised the awareness of this issue. But I also want to really compliment my church leaders, Pequot Library, the Southport Conservancy, the Susquehannocks, the countless residents who gave money and effort to have their voices be heard. And I will tell you, in many conversations with them in the beginning, they felt as though we're going to try, but boy, we're going up against a monopoly. But I'm telling you, it is a reinforcement that the people's voice, when collaborating, when working together, can make a difference. And I'll reinforce that kind of idea legislatively. Make no mistake about it, this was originally a House bill, and it could not have been done without the leadership of the Judiciary Committee with Representative Leeper and the various House committee chairs in the area, Government Administration, Energy and Technology, you have Environment, and most important of all, the leadership of Representative Staffstrom in Judiciary. Not only did he lead the initiative and have that bill come out of that committee, but he wrote the language. So he's a doggone good lawyer as well. It is not to be dismissed. It's not to be taken lightly. He deserves tremendous credit for the leadership, because not only did he write the bill and draft it in legislatively, he brought municipalities on board. It was an issue not only of Fairfield, it was Fairfield and Bridgeport. It wasn't just about communities impacted. It was about environment and social equity. There are many other communities that didn't have the voice, that didn't have the financial means to battle. This bill, 5507, as it's drafted, fulfilled a lot of that mission. So the House deserves tremendous credit. Representative Leeper worked her heart out on this. I was trying to manage my words here, but her passion is evident, and she deserves tremendous credit. So it goes to the Senate after passage. Now, that was some drama, wasn't it? I think the Senate needed to pass the bill, but the Senate works in a little bit of a different dynamic.
In very mysterious ways.
Yeah, and make no mistake about it, the opposition that was put forth by the utilities, and not only UI, but Eversource joined in that collaboration as well. There were, I count them, you didn't realize it up in the Senate, there were about 12 lobbyists representing those entities on the Senate floor. Now, on May 8th, we have a constitutional deadline to end session at midnight. Well, the bill didn't get called yet. And we worked through a lot of different personalities. Would that be fair to say in the Senate?
There are certainly personalities in the House of Lords, yes, sir.
But this is where experience and relationships matter. I went to the chair of energy, who didn't really like this bill. I went to the chair of environment in the Senate, who was okay with it, right? I went to the chair of GAE, who was supportive of it, because Representative Blumenthal did a wonderful job drafting some of the language that was inserted in. Then I went and I have a relationship with the Senate Chair of Judiciary. Then I had to talk to leadership of both the House and the Senate, because there were trade-offs back and forth. Then I had to go to the governor's office to follow through and remind them that they had worked closely with the House to get this project done. And they had their fingerprints on it. All of this was going on the last day, going to the last hour. Practically. Representative Leeper came upstairs saying, "Where are we?" Long story short, we were able to use our experience and trusted relationships to say, this is a good bill. Ultimately, I believe we voted and passed this bill out unanimously at 11:40. I was counting the minutes. And the only reason, no, it was unanimous. There was one absent vote. Oh, yeah, that's right. I apologize. We had to take a vote at 11:40 because one of the senators was an Eversource attorney, and he had to recuse himself. He recused himself. The bottom line is this: it was a complete and total team effort. And I'm proud to say that, because if it wasn't, it would not have gotten done. It was hard work, sincere, genuine effort, and trust in the relationships that were built in that building. That's how we got it done. So kudos to everybody. It was a total team effort, but I'm going to echo what Representative Staffstrom said. Our work is absolutely not done. The governor needs to sign the bill. And I was buoyed by the confidence of the chair of judiciary, but I am going to make a call tomorrow, and I'm going to pursue this as though he is going to veto it, because until he signs it, I don't trust anything to chance. And I would encourage all of you to remind him how important this is to a broader community. It's not just Fairfield, it's not just Bridgeport. It is all of our communities that will be impacted, because trust me, and I think that's the power of this conversation, it is not only Fairfield and Bridgeport. It will affect all of our communities, and everybody should be collaborating together. I think the second important part where our work is not done is the fact we need to continue supporting the interveners, because ultimately they will bring the utilities to the table, because time is money for them, but also the goal to me is very simple: bury the lines.
Thank you very much.
Nothing less is acceptable.
I just want to say one thing. We didn't recognize David Parker by name, and there's so many volunteers who have done so much, but I think I would feel I would go home tonight and think about it for like a week that I didn't publicly thank David Parker for everything he's done for this work. All of the incredible graphics, everything to scale. So much of these videos was David Parker, and he's an architect, and you can tell by the quality of his work, but he has sacrificed so much time to do this for our entire community's benefit. And I just wanted to make sure that he was recognized. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Leeper. Thank you so much to our panelists for the background, for the explanation. And now we want to turn it over to you for questions, comments. We have a microphone over here. Please, same as we did last time, feel free to step up to the mic. I see someone with their hand raised in the back. Do you want to come up to the microphone? The one thing I'm going to suggest is that you point the microphone directly at your mouth and speak directly into it so that we can all hear you. Yeah, it's right here at the end of this aisle.
Hi, my name is Judith DeGraffenried. I am with the grassroots organization Connecticut for Responsible Technology, and we've had a lot of interaction with the Connecticut Siding Council. And the first thing I want to say that has not been mentioned, who funds the Connecticut Siding Council? They are not a legitimate agency. They have no authority, because they are 100% funded by the application fees from industry. We have the documentation from them where they admit that they're funded not by the taxpayers, but by the industry, so they represent the industry. I'd also like to say, if you go on their website, what you will see is a public statement that tall towers pose a significant risk. I can email this to members of the committee. I have the links. I have all the information. I just don't have it on the top of my head. I got some ear issues, so I'm a little off today. But they publicly acknowledge on their website that there's significant risk in tall towers. And now we're talking about unbelievably tall towers. The other thing I want to talk about, and I'll keep it brief, with the Connecticut Siding Council, if you look on their website, they never not approve anything. They always give their approval. They rubber stamp everything. And that is very suspicious to me. So I think they lack integrity. And if you look at their record, they don't approve anything. And in fact, and I'll just give one case. We're fighting some cell towers in Brookfield. And the Connecticut Siding Council stated that there was a need for these cell towers, because you mentioned they said there was a need when there's no need. Well, my friends and I have invested personally in meters. I've spent personally $1,500 on meters. We go out. We are boots on the ground. We go to the sites and we measure it. Because when the industry pit bull says there's a need, we actually go out and say, according to our meters, there's no need. So my friend within our group went out to Brookfield where CT Siding Council said there's a need. She had her meter, which identified every antenna, the company and the power. There was zero need, even though they said there was a need. We gave the information to the CT Siding Council and to the town of Brookfield, and the cell tower was approved anyway, despite the fact there being no need and the health hazards. And we have proof of the health hazards from the EMF. I'm not going to go into that tonight. I'd be happy to talk to somebody about the extreme health hazards. That's proven. We have proven documentation, so I'll be very happy to send it out. I want to say one other thing. We need to be cautious because absolutely underground lines are better than the overhead ones that, with all the wild weather we're getting in this country, I'm not comfortable with that. But also the underground lines do have, and they need to research this. I'm going to ask you to research this, a health risk in terms of the magnetic fields. And they don't know what that is. Personally, there's no need. Why do we need this? Why are they doing this to us? Okay, they want to make money sending it to New York, but there's also another impulse behind that, and I would ask people to look into that, is the concept of the tremendous need for power to power the surveillance system. We are coming into a time where we are under increasing surveillance and the databases require huge amounts of electricity. I would like to ask the committee to investigate the concept of the smart city and 15-minute city and what maybe another ulterior plan might be. I'm just throwing this out there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And I neglected to mention, we'd like to keep our comments and questions to 3 minutes so that we have enough opportunity to give you all a chance to speak. Thank you.
Good evening. I just wanted to echo the sentiments of Senator Wang and say that this is a true bipartisan effort. And as a Republican, I support it. I have a very interesting question to ask of our selectman, because I think he can lead us and perhaps we can all find a solution. About the time you mentioned that you had met with the UI, were you aware of a change of control that was taking place with the UI's parent company? And what communications have we had, not just with the UI, because they are not the captains of their destiny. They don't have the financial capacity to fund this. However, 3 weeks ago, after the UI told us that burying the lines would cost $755 million, Iberdrola wrote out a check for $2.4 billion in order to acquire the remaining interest in their subsidiary that sits over the UI of Angrid. How is it conscionable that Iberdrola doesn't want to support its own subsidiaries' burying of our lines, yet writes a check out to increase its investment?
Well, I can tell you, I've had no interaction with the parent company, only with United Illuminating, but in terms of change of control.
UI is represented by counsel in the case. So all of our communications have to be driven through counsel. So their attorney brings the representatives they bring to our meetings, and we can't control or dictate who they bring, and the communications have to be filtered through their lawyer.
Counselor, I agree with you. From a legal standpoint, yes, that's the channel. But we also have a leader, and we also have very concerned citizens sitting in the room here. And I believe that another form of redress is to go to the parent companies and tell them that we do not agree with what their subsidiary wants to do. And maybe, just maybe, the message will come across. I agree with the legal, but that the legal does not obviate or eliminate the political. I have no other questions.
Hi, my name is Harry Krausman. I'm a Fairfield resident. My question is there a public hearing scheduled or required where UI shows up so that there can be interaction between the community and themselves, aside from the legal and what's going on in the state Senate and so forth?
So there's not a process like that at this point. I mean, we could invite them to town to do a public hearing. I'm not sure how constructive that would be because they would give us their talking points and their propaganda. We could do that, but I'm not sure how constructive it would be. There's not, through the Siting Council or the court proceedings, there's not a town hall or public meeting where UI has to come and participate with us.
So there's no requirement for that.
There's no, at this point in the process, there's not. They are during the consultation phase of, which happened a few years ago, they are required, if the municipality wants, to have a public informational session in the municipality to provide information on the project, but that point has passed.
Just so you know,
right,
that
Jen Lieber is pointing out that they did have that in Fairfield.
they held something at the library. I'm not sure anyone knew about it or went. And they claim they post things in places that people don't expect to look for it. And at the time, the town didn't really promote it or even pay attention to it. So they can claim that they went through that process and part of this new law will make it more transparent so that people will know.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, everyone that's here. My name is Elliot Osgood. I'm a resident at 33 Spruce Street, Southport. I'm on the north side of the tracks. My wife and I just moved with our baby boy and another one on the way. Last year, when we bought the house, we reached very far financially to make it happen, because this has been a dream of ours to move back to this town and be a part of this community. I grew up here. I plan on being in it for the duration. And I look forward to being a resource to all the tremendous work that you have done. I have a very lighthearted comment. I am wildly suspicious of my self-proclaimed boomer parents and have just, as of tonight, gotten them to finally remember to send the letter to the governor. And I think the only thing that would really break my heart leaving this evening is if all of the incredible work that our representatives have done isn't equally matched with support. We have made it insanely, ridiculously easy. If you have a smartphone, scan the QR code. And a lot of folks, like I just had friends that did this today, they're like, oh, I don't have time to write a letter. Like, what do I say? It's already pre-filled. If you want to add your own comments, please do so. My encouragement or call to action would be, at a minimum, please inform or ask 3 people, 3 neighbors that you know, to join in on support. If you're on the fence, please talk to any of us after the fact. This is beyond like the aesthetics of town. This is beyond devaluing our neighborhood. This is about like an illegitimate process happening in our state that is lining the pockets of a foreign entity. And it's not, it's pretty simple. And so I think any of us would feel that that's unjust. It has no place in the state of Connecticut. Bipartisan. We've got too many people that care about this state. So please make sure you can do it like while you're here. So if you haven't done it, like just pull out your phone and do it. Scan the QR code and make sure you get 3 friends to do it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Elliot. Oh, I was just going to say, thank you, Elliot. You're hired.
Okay. Quick shout out to Sean Kelly for those very, very well-constructed notices, and Lisa Claire for helping pull together the PR group on this process.
Hi, my name is Karen Adams, and this has been a very interesting evening for me, because 30 years ago, I did the same fight, and I really recognize all the work that you guys have done. But what's interesting is with that fight, I was a resident of Southport, Connecticut from 79 to 2000, and right now I'm a citizen of Florida, so I cannot speak and lobby right now, but I did 3 years of work on this project as the president of Sasquatch, the neighborhood association. And I worked very closely with then Attorney General Blumenthal, now Senator Blumenthal, who was very sympathetic to this cause. And to the other lady who spoke, we included all of the issues you're talking about, including the health issues concerning children, especially with schools always in the cheapest area along the railroad tracks, low-level radiation for long durations of time. But on the issues that we have tonight, I just want to get to the fact that we already passed the Public Act number 94176 in 1994, an act concerning life cycle cost analysis and certain electric facilities. I don't know if are you aware of that one? Okay, so it already has here all the things about what we missed last time when they snuck in the dark of night, too late to classify section of a local paper, and that was their announcement that they were coming for us to be at a hearing. So we had the lawsuits, we brought them back, and we have in this 1994 act, which I think you could use with recourse of some kind, all the stuff about a notice of such an application for a certificate, yada, yada, also be certified or registered mail to each person appearing of record as an owner of property which abuts the proposed primary or alternative sites in which the facility, and then going on, be provided on a separate enclosure with each customer's monthly bill. So it's already here, 93. Why didn't they do it?
Well, ma'am, so not to cut you off, but
Yeah.
I think they would say, and I think legally both the city and town agree, I mean, they did the bare minimum they're required to. They met their statutory obligations under that. What our legislation does is actually takes that law and we amended that law now, and we added onto it. We've beefed that up, so to speak.
Okay. Well, we could talk later on this, but it does have things that were not done properly with separate instructions included in 24-point type. None of that was done. And the life cycle analysis cost wasn't, I mean, to me, it seems like it's in violation of this act from way back then. I know you've improved on it, but this was already existing, and why weren't they held accountable? And one other thing, keep working, especially the volunteer I identify with, Andrea, because I have my final resting place is at the Congo Church in the Memorial Garden. I don't want to be under the wires.
Let's take one more question publicly, and then our panelists will remain if anybody has questions and wants to speak privately with them.
So my question is, what do you want us to do apart from sending a note to the governor about signing that legislation?
I don't know why I raised my hand. Old habits die
Yes,
hard.
Representative Lieber, I call on you.
Thank you. If you are able and interested, I would encourage you to contribute to SNEDI. They have incurred a tremendous amount of legal fees for their fight that we all will benefit from. And this is the one ask I made in front of Pequot Library back this fall, and I will continue to make it because, again, they have undertaken just an absolutely Herculean task and to the benefit of all of us. So if you're able, what is the website?
Sorry. Empoweringfairfield.org. There are donate buttons on every page.
And I would also echo that sentiment in supporting SNEDI. And I would ask Representative Staffstrom, because this truly is a multi-community initiative, are there any Bridgeport initiatives like Freeman House or any that could also gather support from our broader community to truly be multi-community?
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Good point. So the city of Bridgeport, and this is an important part, has appealed the decision in Fairfield. So, the city is fully committed to fighting this. They are pursuing their appeal just as Fairfield is pursuing its appeal on its. There's not a separate sort of community group that is undertaking an appeal separate from the city, but certainly I know the Freeman Houses would certainly appreciate the support, as would the local NRZs.
Hi, just quickly, promise, 30 seconds. So much to say, but I'm going to actually address your comment because there is a grassroots community group that has reached out to both Avangrid and Iberdrola's highest level. So they are aware of the community's work and their opposition to this project and the desire to bury it underground. So that has happened. Yeah. That's because they're the ones burying us. But we shall bury their wires.
My understanding is Iberdrola is getting all this money for the expansion by selling more stock. They really are. They're increasing the number of shares and getting money from the general public who wants to invest in them. I have a question. If the power lines were buried, wouldn't the company also have an easement over that power line? A permanent easement? And doesn't it have to be buried fairly deep so somebody doesn't get cute and maybe put a bird feeder stake in the ground
So typically
dig up
when
and put a new garden in?
it's a good question. So typically when power lines are buried, they're buried in roads. So we have a power line on the post road in Fairfield already. So it's already disturbed soil. They don't need to take new land from private property owners. They would bury them under roads. That's typically where they would go.
I can see, burying the line, creating a big mess, having to worry about digging around people's wells, people's gardens, to me.
If I could interrupt for a minute, we have some folks leaving. What I would like to do is kind of wrap up our public session, and then could we take your question offline? I just want to thank you all for attending before folks file out.
Just some comments.
Anybody can stay and have questions answered by our panelists who are going to remain up here. Feel free to come on up the risers and talk to them. I just want to thank you all for coming. Thank you for your support. And in addition to, as Elliot said, using the QR code to write the governor, if you can't figure out the QR code, we have come see Elliot in the front row. We do have folks out in the front who can help you. Also, if you want to stay in touch with this fight, we need your contact information. So we have sign-up sheets out in the front. If we can get your name and your email, we can keep you informed. Without that, it's very difficult. So give us your information, write to the governor. As you've heard tonight, we think this bill will pass, but we're not sure of it. So we really need the support. As David Ball, our attorney on this specific issue, said, the most successful efforts he's seen are the ones where the community is engaged and mobilized and presents a show of unity, and that's where we'll really see change. So thank you to our panelists, to our organizers, and to all of you.